Okay, please join me in Gassho. Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu Namanda Butsu. I'd like to begin. Can everyone hear me without a microphone? Is this okay? Glenn, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So, yeah, I think I'll try to go without the microphone. And I'd like to begin by reading, there's a passage here on the handout. This is from one of the sermons of the Buddha. And this talks about right mindfulness. So I thought it would be a nice way to kind of begin our day reflecting on this wonderful aspect of the Buddhist tradition. I invite you to join me in Gassho. And what is right mindfulness? This is the case where a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. He remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, the mind in and of itself, mental qualities in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. This is called right mindfulness. Namandavats, 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 namandavats. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here to speak with you this morning, and this topic of mindfulness. It's kind of a heavy burden. This is like the topic these days with Buddhism and America, and we're sort of in the midst of a mindfulness boom. Every 15 to 20 years or so, Buddhism gets really popular. When I was in college, we said 1996. I came back from India. I was in college, and have you heard of the band The Beastie Boys? Yeah. So they had this album, Ill Communication, came out. I realize that's like oldies for some of you, but there's this song, Bodhisattva Vow, that features the chanting of Tibetan monks. And when I was a college student, actually before college, when I was in high school, I went to see the Beastie Boys play in the Lollapalooza conference, and that was the year that they had, let's see, who else was there? George Clinton, the Breeders, the Beastie Boys, Tribe Called Quest. It was a great year for Lollapalooza. And at the very beginning, they had the Tibetan monks come out with their giant horns, and all of these, teenagers and 20-somethings, they were into it. They're like, whoa, dude. But so Buddhism was cool, and the movies, there's an actor by the name of Brad Pitt. He was in a movie called 7 Years in Tibet. Martin Scorsese directed Kundun. Keanu Reeves was in Little Buddha. So all of these movies and all of these things, Tibetan Buddhism was like the cool thing at the time. And it was cool to be Buddhist. It was really cool. And this was a time I had just come back from India, and I was interested in Buddhism, and I was kind of looking for the direction in my life, and I really felt like, yeah, Buddhism, this is something I can do Buddhism here in America. And then a few years passed, and Buddhism wasn't so cool anymore. And at one point, maybe in like the mid-2000s, somebody posted something on Facebook, and someone else said, Buddhism, that's so 1996. Yeah. But now Buddhism is cool again. It's hip, right? Thanks to this mindfulness movement. And mindfulness, as we see in this passage from the words, it's been part of the Buddhist tradition from the very beginning. Many of you I recognize from temple life. Some of you maybe are new to Buddhism, but anyone here unfamiliar with the idea of the Eightfold Path? Eightfold Path. Okay, I didn't really see too many hands go up, but this is the basic kind of core teaching of Buddhism. If somebody asks you, what's Buddhism about? People generally say, Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Right? The Four Noble Truths: life is stressful, life is difficult, life is dukkha. Some people say suffering, but I recently heard Reverend Ken Tanaka gave a wonderful talk on this subject, and he said, dukkha is like a shopping cart. Have you ever had a shopping cart where one of the wheels was a little bit off kilter, and it's sort of pulling your cart into the Cheerios when you just want to go down to the Boca Burgers, right? So that's dukkha. That's our lives. We're constantly being kind of pulled off course. And what is it that pulls us off course? That's the second noble truth. It's craving. It's, I want it to be my way. It's really me and mine. My way or the highway, right? It's got to be the way I want it to be, or I'm not going to be happy. And you know what? It's not going to be the way you want it to be, so you're not going to be happy. And that's the second truth, that suffering, difficulty, stress, dissatisfaction, it comes from this craving and this grasping. And then the third truth is the truth of nirvana, the truth of liberation, that you can be free from this suffering. You can straighten out that wheel if you can let go of this craving, this desire, this it's got to be my way thinking. And then how do you do that? And that's what the thing that really hooked me on Buddhism is that not only does the Buddha offer this clear breakdown of the problem of human existence, but he also offers a prescription. What do you do? And that consists of these 8 aspects, the 8-fold path. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And so this passage here this is the second passage here on this handout. This is from one of the Buddha's most representative or often cited descriptions of this right mindfulness. What is it? To be aware of the mind, to be aware of the body, and to understand what you're feeling, to look inward. So it's about self-awareness, looking inward. And this is this practice that's being widely promoted and touted. I just included on the handout just one little blurb from a very popular book called Mindfulness for Dummies. Mindfulness for Dummies. And this, I just pulled this off Amazon, but it's sort of telling us something about what mindfulness means to people here in America. Use mindfulness to relax and control anxiety, depression, stress, and pain. Whether you're looking to control your depression and anxiety levels, improve concentration and reduce stress, or just want to restore balance in your life, Mindfulness for Dummies shows you how to slow down, become aware of what is going around you, and react effectively. Focusing on breathing and other self-control techniques, the practice of mindfulness is scientifically proven to calm jittery nerves and free the mind of distracting thoughts, mental clutter, and unrealistic expectations. So, and there are hundreds of books, hundreds of things out on the in our world that we can consume, in a sense, these days that offer these wonderful benefits. Low stress, low anxiety, other things that are touted are increased productivity. You can do a better job at your work. You won't be distracted. It'll teach you how to work without having to check Facebook every 5 minutes and not get anything done. You'll be able to concentrate, and so on and so forth. And these are some of the benefits that we have in our sort of modern world presented from mindfulness. And there's a little bit of a, what should we say, dissonance between this presentation and the purpose of, we might say, mindfulness and meditation practice from a Buddhist perspective. A few years ago, when I was in Los Angeles, I heard a kind of leading Zen teacher talk about what she does at her center. And she said, people come into my center, they're stressed out, LA people, and they want to know how to relax. They come here to relax. And I have a simple answer for them. You want to relax, there's a bar down the street, go get a beer. So that this practice is about something greater, realizing some greater understanding than just being relaxed and comfortable. And so what I'd like to talk about a little bit this morning is from a Buddhist perspective and from a Jodo Shinshu perspective. what is mindfulness all about? I'm a priest here in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, and so this is, you invite me to be your guest speaker, this is what you get. I'm going to talk about Jodo Shinshu Buddhism and try to share this with you in a way so that we can all understand a little bit about how does this thing that's so trendy and hip right now relate to what we've been doing in this Jodo Shinshu tradition for hundreds, in a sense, thousands of years as Buddhists. So when I first got interested in Buddhism, as Miko mentioned, I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. I was not raised as a Buddhist. I grew up in a Lutheran Christian household. And when I went off to India, my mother had given me one very clear instruction. She said, when you come home, I want you to be a Christian. And she reminded me again and again as I was packing up my suitcase, picking out which CDs I was going to bring. This was a day when you had to carry all of your music physically. And she said, she sort of peeked her head in my room, now remember, Henry, I want you to come home as a Christian. And, I said, okay, yeah, Mom. And then, I sort of went to India and I had this wonderful experience. I had wonderful host families. I had my first host family, deeply spiritual family, really impressed me. And while I was observing all of this kind of suffering and difficulty that you see on the streets of India, there's a real problem with poverty there. At least there was 20 years ago when I was there. I don't know if it's been completely resolved or not, but when I was there, I saw people living in very difficult circumstances, and I was living with very wealthy, affluent families, so I was living very comfortably. And I had this kind of confusion, and I wasn't really sure how to kind of wrap my mind around this. And my host father at the time was a very compassionate, very perceptive man, and he could see things were bothering me. Could see there's something, you have questions, and so he would engage me in conversation. He would ask me, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are your impressions? And we would have these very profound conversations, and they were really rooted in his Hindu spiritual practice and his outlook and his belief. And I think the kind of larger Indian religious worldview, which includes Hinduism and Buddhism. And I was very moved by this, and I began to kind of write letters as I was writing letters to my parents and talking to them on the phone, finding a phone booth where you could use an international calling card, paying 80 cents a minute to talk to my parents over a scratchy phone line, describe what I was seeing, what I was doing. Very excited, and also very excited about this new way of looking at the world. And my mother got very nervous about this. She got very nervous. And I remember one call in particular, I was closed off in this phone booth. There was so much street noise and cars honking and people shouting. I had to close off this booth even though it was 95 and humid outside. So I was sort of baking in this thing and sweat running down my face. And I remember my mom's voice coming over the line. Now remember, Henry, we have that deal. You have to come back as a Christian. And so I sort of, burst out of this phone booth and staggered back home. And that evening at dinner, my host father said, I can tell something's bothering you. What is it? Tell me what's bothering you. Very straightforward, but very kind and supportive. He said, my mother's worried about me. He said, is she worried because she's afraid you're going to get sick? Has she heard about all these illnesses and things that are happening in India? And I said, no, she knows that you take good care of me, Uncle. I would call them Uncle and Auntie. And I said, she knows you take good care of me, and she's not worried about that. She's actually worried that I'm going to become a Hindu. And my host father at that point just burst out laughing. And I says, what's so funny? He says, you can't become a Hindu. And in the back of my mind, I was kind of thinking about it, but I was like, and so I was a little bit, why not? And he said, you can't become a Hindu. You already are a Hindu. He says, anyone who seeks the truth is a Hindu. And so I was like, wow. It sort of opened up this new kind of perspective for me. And, I didn't wind up embracing Hinduism, but this sort of larger Indian way of looking at life and looking at spirituality is what kind of connected with me and resonated with me. And that continued so that I got the sort of the perspective, but I didn't get the compassion part. So I still had this kind of rebellious teenager. I turned 18 while I was there, so I just sort of had this rebellious streak, and so I played a mean prank on my parents when I came home. I talked to my friends, and I used to go to these weddings and things, and so my host families had purchased for me very nice sort of traditional Hindu wedding attire. These white kind of, if you've ever seen a picture of Gandhi, it's called a dhoti. It's like this giant cloth that wraps around and ties under and looks like a pair of baggy MC Hammer pants, basically, and then this long shirt. And so I went into the airplane bathroom on the plane right before we landed at Minneapolis Airport. So I had a changeover, so from LAX to Minneapolis. Then I went into the airport bathroom and I put on this dhoti, this traditional Indian thing. I put on this shirt, and they had this custom of they take like sacred ash and sort of put it across their foreheads as a sign when they do their prayers. And then they put a little thing of like red vermilion on there as a way of their sort of, if you've seen like some Hindu people will have these sort of, you'll see like they have some gray ash on their forehead and some red vermilion spot there. And so I did this whole thing. So I'd been there a year. I knew exactly like the look. I had it down. And so I walked off the airport, and immediately I'm in this with my backpack on in this whole garb, and then I sort of prostrated down at the feet of my parents. And I had one of my friends took a picture of it. And I sent it back to my host father. He's like, "Henry, you have learned the true essence of what it is to be Indian. Respect for your parents." And, he thought this was wonderful. And I was just being a big jerk, giving my poor mother a heart attack. And so in the year that followed, I continued to sort of get more and more deeply connected with Buddhism and sort of focused in on Buddhism. And but also continued this kind of ijiwari, kind of mean streak way of sort of pushing back, like, you want me to be Christian, but I'm going to do this, I'm going to rebel. And but I started reading these books, and they say, okay, this is what you should do. You should be aware of what's going on in your mind, as the Buddha says, mindfulness. Pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're feeling. And so I remember one night sitting in my bedroom. I was home on break. This was during college. I was home on break, sitting down in my bedroom on the floor with a couple pillows piled up to be my meditation cushion. I was going to meditate. I just read a book by Thich Nhat Hanh about this mindfulness practice, and I was sitting there. I was trying to calm my mind. Pay attention to my thoughts, pay attention to my feelings. And so I was counting my breaths, 1 in, 1 out, 2 in, 2 out. And as I was doing this, then, of course, mind naturally wanders. I just had an argument with my dad. And so, I was just like, oh. And I could feel physically that feeling, not just the mental, but I could feel what was going on in my body when I was, kind of getting my, getting my hackles up, so to speak. I was, had this feeling, this kind of, rebellious pushback, going to argue feeling, and I could feel that sort of physical discomfort there. And I was observing, watching my mind. Why am I so mad? What's going on here? And there was this teaching of, let go of me and mine. It's got to be my way. Learn to see from the other person's perspective. And as I was doing this, I came to a kind of, I just had this insight where, I got to be nicer to my parents. I'm being really hypocritical as a Buddhist. I'm, on the one hand, I'm sort of promoting peace and compassion, but these people who've loved me and cared for me my whole life, I'm causing them so much stress and so much anxiety. So at that point, I said, okay, I've got to try to stop fighting so much with my dad and chill out a little bit more. And then I also had this insight where, I've got to become a vegetarian now. So from that, then the next day I announced to my parents, while trying to be kind and compassionate, I announced in our meat and potatoes Midwest household that I'm going to be a vegetarian now. And they were at this point, they were sort of taking it in stride, but I remember my mother was very concerned that I would get enough protein. And she didn't know any vegetarian. She didn't know anything about vegetarian, cooking. I had, prior to this, when I was in India, I was a vegetarian for most of the year. My host families were mostly vegetarian, so I knew I can be a vegetarian and survive. I've eaten a vegetarian diet. And I even had some idea of what goes into a nutritious vegetarian diet. And usually people say when they become vegetarians, they lose weight. But in my case, I didn't like vegetables. So this was kind of a problem. But my mom was very concerned about my protein, and so she kept giving me like nuts and cheese and things like, this has got protein here, you got to eat this. So I gained probably 15 pounds the first 3 months of my life as a vegetarian. And then, over time it sort of, balanced out. But this, that was kind of my first connection and experience of this practice of mindfulness, aware of what's going on with myself, but also this kind of insight coming in. And so there, in the traditional Buddhist teachings, there are kind of two aspects to mindfulness. There's self-awareness, this looking within, and I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of this material that's promoted as mindfulness kind of for sale in a way. Mindfulness, they're selling this kind of self-awareness. Understand yourself. Figure out what's going on with you. And that's a lot of fun. I mean, who doesn't like to think about themselves? Who doesn't like to have a better idea, an understanding of their self? This self-awareness, looking within. But then there's also this aspect of insight. Insight, and that's without the self. That's something coming in from without, outside of myself. And that's so self-awareness, but then opening up and letting insight come in from the outside, from the outside. And so this, we've been talking over the past few months about this program and what we'll be doing over the course of today and this weekend, exploring this concept of mindfulness. And in our conversations, we've kind of worked up this as a kind of framework for what we'll be doing and how we'll be kind of exploring and learning these two aspects. So I think all of the workshops that you'll be doing this afternoon and over the course of this weekend will kind of play into these two aspects. Self-awareness, understanding more about yourself, your way of living, your life, your attitudes, through conversations, through listening to other people's insights. That might bring something into yourself. And then also insight coming in. There'll be opportunities to, we'll have the Buddhism 101 and 201 sessions where we'll have opportunities to hear about the teachings of the Buddha and how this might apply to our lives. So these two aspects, self-awareness, but also this insight coming in. And that's the key aspect of the idea of mindfulness, or right mindfulness in the Buddha's teaching, to understand ourselves, but also to be mindful in a way that we can appreciate when these insights come in. And this perspective is also here very much in the Nembutsu tradition. So up to this point, I've been giving you kind of a big picture view of mindfulness from a Buddhist perspective, Buddhism as a whole. And my personal feeling is that there's no difference between the teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha and Shinran Shonin's appreciation of that teaching, between Jodo Shinshu Buddhism and Buddhism as a whole. But I want to talk a little bit about how these concepts and how this mindfulness plays out in our Jodo Shinshu tradition, and in something that we've done already several times this morning, which is the Nembutsu, the Nembutsu. The Nembutsu. Nembutsu is when we say Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu. Right? Namu Amida Butsu. And so this word nen means to be mindful. This is the same character that's used in Chinese when we write the word right mindfulness as shou nen. The right way to show is correct. Shou nen. And so that's right mindfulness. And so the Nembutsu is to be mindful of the Buddha. Mindful of the Buddha. And so again, there are these two aspects of this, to be self-aware, what kind of person am I? What kind of life am I living? But then also to be aware of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. Buddha's wisdom and compassion coming in, and it comes into us through the Dharma, through the teachings of the Buddha. One of the characteristic traits of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is to come to this self-awareness and to recognize the limitations of the ego. And again, this, I think, connects deeply with the teachings of Shakyamuni, that the ego is what causes us to go off track, that our attachments, our cravings are what causes us to go off track. Our greed, our anger is causing us to go off track. And so to be self-aware is to see that pulling us, this greed, anger, and ignorance. And then to recognize that the Buddha's wisdom is there providing us with a right path, supporting us, helping us to keep from falling off track. So my kids love swimming in the summertime. They love swimming, I think, year-round, but we only usually go in the summer because we don't have that many indoor pools where we live. So there's a swimming pool in our neighborhood, and it's open in the summer months. And spring is coming, so my kids are already starting to ask, when's the pool opening? When are we going to the pool? Our older son's birthday is in June, and he's already talking about his pool party at the pool. Is it June yet? No, it's March. Oh, isn't it my birthday next week? No, your birthday's in about 3 months. Okay, so we're talking about this already. And the younger one, he's 2 now, and so he started talking pretty early. So even last summer, when he was about 1.5, he was already starting to say pool, 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 pool. And he says 2 words. He says pool, and he says jump, jump. He loves to jump into the pool. And the older one, he can kind of touch now, but the younger one loves to jump, but he needs to be caught, right? But he doesn't understand that. Well, I think he gets that he needs to be caught, but he doesn't understand that the person who's catching him needs to see him jump in order to be caught. So there are different kinds of swimming pools, right? There's the swimming pool in our neighborhood that has a lifeguard. And then there's a swimming pool at 24-hour Fitness. 24-hour Fitness is a place, it's a gym, right? And it's open, surprise, surprise, 24 hours a day. And that includes a swimming pool. One of my great senior ministers, Reverend Laverne Sasaki, some of you may know Sasaki Sensei from his years of service throughout the BCA. And he's a regular, he lives in San Bruno, he's a regular attendee at San Mateo. And his number one question for other ministers is, Sensei, are you exercising? He always asks other ministers, you exercise? He says, do you exercise? He says, yeah, I guess I chase my kids around. He says, that's not enough. It's like, you got to get exercise. Your life is too precious. It's too precious. You got to take care of your health. You need to exercise. He says, I exercise. I swim. I swim laps. Oh, Sensei, you swim laps. That's great. Where do you swim? I swim at 24-hour Fitness. I say, wow, that's great. So when do you usually go? I usually go at 2 in the morning. swims at 2 in the morning. He says, there's no one there. I get a lane all to myself. It's like, I hate sharing a lane. He says, but I like it all by myself. And I say, do they have lifeguards there? He says, no, not at that time. Okay? But Sasaki Sensei, he's a good swimmer. He can swim well, and he's got it under control, so that's fine. Now, at the Fiesta Gardens swimming pool in my neighborhood, there are lifeguards. And I'm grateful that there are lifeguards because my responsibility, my job, is to make sure that these 2 people don't drown when we're at the pool, right? And I don't do a very good job of that sometimes, you know. So I need to keep an eye on both of them, but the older one is, Daddy, 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 and so I'm looking at him, and then the younger one, out of the corner of my eyes, sploosh, pop him up, right? But, so, you know, I'm not fully able to be fully present in the way that I should be, and so I am very, very grateful that there is a lifeguard there in the pool. And so, because I understand my own limitations, my own limited capacity to protect the lives of my own children, I'm very grateful that there's this lifeguard here protecting us and supporting us. So that's also the way that I feel about the teachings of the Buddha. I recognize that, you know, I try to be calm, I try to be peaceful, I try to be mindful, but, you know, maybe I get a text message from my wife that's kind of abrupt. You know, you didn't change his diaper. Now he's got a rash. I'm like, oh, I'm busy. I don't have time to be checking diapers before I leave the house. You know, so but then, you know, so this, you know, that's not the right, compassionate, ego-free response. That's, you know, that's all ego and anger and, oh, I'm busy, my schedule, my time. And so at those moments, to be able to say, oh, okay, look at me, this ball of anger, and yet I have this other thing I can turn my mind to turn my mind to the Buddha, turn my mind to the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. And so mindfulness for me is this recognition of myself as I am, but also recognition that I have this other axis that I can turn onto, that I can bring my mind around to this other way of looking at the world, this wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. When I can adopt that perspective, then I can see, oh no, wait a second, that's not the response. The response is, thank you for letting me know. I will be more attentive next time. And then to play that out in life before I leave the house. Okay, I know I'm in a rush, but wait a second. You know, he's probably pooped in his diaper. Let's have a look. Even though you don't want to, you know, but let's have a look, right? And so, so this, you know, we say Namu Amida Butsu, and we have a portrait here of Dennyo Shonin over there. And Dennyo Shonin gave us, I think, a wonderful explanation of what Namu Amida Butsu is all about. This Namu, does anyone know what this word Namu means? You can say Tadao, I know you know.
Sometimes it's translated as I take refuge.
That's the way we usually translate it, following Shinran Shonin's reading. That's the way Shinran Shonin reads this, is I take refuge. A good graduate student, of course, he's qualifying that. Well, if you look at the Sanskrit roots, it actually means to bow down, but I take refuge. And then this Amida Butsu. Amida is an interesting word. Let's get some other colors going here. So this shares a similar linguistic root with English. So we have words like apathetic, somebody who doesn't care, right? Or atypical, something that's not typical. So it has this meaning of negating something. And then Mida is another cognate with English, like meter, a measure of something. Parking meter, water meter as a measure of distance. So Amida is immeasurable, right? Oh, I need another M there, don't I? Immeasurable. And then Butsu is Buddha. And this word Buddha is not a name. It's not a name, right? You know, sometimes we hear people talk about Buddha, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. Jesus and Muhammad are people's names, but Buddha is a title. It means one who has woken up, the awakened one. So we all have the potential to become Buddhas. That's the great thing about Buddhism. We all have the potential to wake up, become awakened ones like the Buddha. So the Buddha is the awakened one of immeasurable what? Immeasurable light and life. Immeasurable light and life. And this light represents wisdom. It's the wisdom of the Buddha shining into our minds. No matter what kind of a dark place we go into mentally, that light of the Buddha's wisdom is always shining in, illuminating, showing us the truth. Even in that, that dark room of anger and rage, that light can still break through and penetrate into my mind, show me the way to turn around and realize compassion. And that's the life of the Buddha. So this Namu aspect, this is about, if you take refuge, you think about a refuge. I used to live in Japan for a number of years, and I lived in a place where there were a lot of natural disasters, a place called Miyazaki. It's on the southeastern side of the island of Kyushu. And so when there are typhoons that start out in the Pacific Ocean, and they usually somehow sort of come up, they hit Okinawa, and then they keep going up and they hit Kyushu, and they often hit Miyazaki. They often hit Miyazaki where I was living. And one of my jobs while I was there was to assist and help out people who were living there, English teachers, a lot of English teachers who were living there teaching on the JET program. So they were in very remote villages, some of them. And so I remember one year there was a particularly bad typhoon, and there were mudslides everywhere. There was lots of flooding. And one of the people who I knew, one of my friends there, was looking out her window, and she saw that the floodwaters were rising. She's like, this is kind of strange. And she had this little box in her room that was making announcements, but it was just blabbering on in Japanese. She couldn't figure out what it was saying. And so she went to her neighbors, no one was there next door. To the next neighbor, no one was there next door. Everybody had evacuated from her apartment building, but they'd forgotten to check if she was home. And so her boss, fortunately, when everyone got to this evacuation center, her boss sort of was doing a head count, and he's like, whoa, where's Anna? And then he went to her house and picked her up and brought her to that place. But they were completely cut off from the rest of the prefecture. So they were airlifting things in, food and water and everything, into this kind of small mountain village. And everybody was gathered in this refuge. It was like a junior high school gymnasium. But because they recognized that we can't live on our own. We can't go about our normal daily lives. We need to pull together. We need to come together in this safe place to support each other and to take care of each other and to be supported by something coming from outside, from coming in on helicopters and various airlifted things coming into them. And so that's this idea of refuge for me. I think about that when I think about refuge, this sense of recognizing like, wow, I need help. And I go somewhere. To get that help. And so this taking refuge begins with self-awareness. to see the condition of my life as it is, and then to look, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? Where is this foolish, angry, greedy guy going to go for refuge, for guidance, for support? And then here, right here, we have the compassion of the Buddha. So the wisdom and compassion of the Buddha. So there are these two aspects in the Nembutsu. There is this Namu, recognizing myself, and then going to the Buddha's immeasurable wisdom and compassion for refuge, for sustenance, to be guided and supported in this way. So I'd like to, I'll just sort of recap this again. So Namu Amida Butsu. Namu, so we say Namu. Namu is this self-awareness, to look within myself, to recognize myself. And then this Amida Butsu it's this statue, right? We have the statue of Amida Buddha, but what is behind that statue, in that statue, emanating from that statue, is immeasurable wisdom and compassion. It's a beautiful piece of wood covered in gold, but what it really represents is this immeasurable wisdom and compassion coming forth all the time in our lives, supporting and guiding us. So I want to share with you a kind of traditional way of talking about this relationship between ourselves and the Buddha. And I think this is, to me, one of the most wonderful expressions of mindfulness in the Jodo Shinshu tradition. And it's a story. I'm not going to read it, but it's here in detail, basically the handout from the front and back side. As you can see, I really worked hard to fit it all onto a single double-sided page and not make the font like micro font. But this has the story, and it has the sort of the explanation. Again, I'm going to paraphrase, but if you're really interested and want to get into this, you can read it here. I also provided the information. It's all available. You can read the entire text online. If you have a copy of the collected works of Shinran, it's in there too. But it's a story about a traveler. It's a story about a traveler. And I'm going to ask you all to bear with me on my sort of limited artistic abilities here. So this is a story about a traveler. We'll give him a stick. So he's a traveler. And he's checking out what colors I have here. He's coming out of a forest. He's been traveling along, and he's traveling through this forest. It's a vast and solitary wilderness. So it's this very difficult journey. He's on this very difficult journey, traveling through a vast and solitary wilderness. And there's all kinds of baddies here in the wilderness. All kinds of not too nice guys. They're here. And they have, they've got swords. And they're not nice guys. And they're bandits. They're going to try to mug him, right? It's like a really horrible neighborhood, right? A really bad neighborhood that you don't want to be sort of caught in after dark. And so he's walking through this really rough neighborhood, this really bad area, and there's all of this problem. And not only are there these bad guys, but they're also very nasty beasts here too. This looks kind of like an anteater with fangs, but but this horrifying creatures there in the woods. So it's this world of difficulty and suffering that he's walking through, and he's trying to escape it, but he comes along and he's sort of getting to the woods. He's like, okay, I'm finally out of the woods. He sees the clearing, it's opening up. He finally comes to the woods, comes out of the woods, and he comes upon this river. This river is running as far as he could see to the north and the south. So he's coming from the east. He's traveling westward. And this river is running for as far as the eyes can see to the north and to the west. Okay? And so, extending to the south. So to the south is fire. It's this river of fire. It goes all the way to the south, as far as you can see, just flames. It's like there was a big, oil spill or something like that, and then somebody dropped a lit cigarette into it. And it's big conflagration, this burning flames to the south. And to the north, churning waters, big waves, rushing rapids, you can imagine, rushing rapids to the north and to the south. Okay, this churning western thing, and he's at this point, and he notices that there's a narrow white path. There's a narrow white path. But the rivers, are they're like splashing over onto the path. Both the water, these strong currents, and also the flames are splashing onto the path. So he can kind of see the path, it's there, but he also sees that it's narrow and that there's flames and water. So you can imagine it's like walking a tightrope. And he's stuck. He's stuck here because he's afraid to go forward, in a sense. He's like, I don't want to fall into this water and get burned. I don't want to fall into the water and get drowned, fall into the fire and get burned. But yet, there's these wild beasts and these muggers coming after me from behind. And so he's at this crisis moment. What am I going to do? And then at that time, there's this voice. He hears this voice calling. Saying, go forth. And I know it looks sketchy, I know it looks dangerous, but you can do it. Go forth. You will reach the other shore. You will reach the other side. So he has this sort of, and then, he's sort of gradually beginning to take the path, and there's another voice then from this side. And this voice saying, come forth. So on two sides of the river, there's one voice saying, go for it, you can do it, cheering him on, go forward. Another voice on this side saying, come on, you can go, you can make it, you'll make it, just trust me, you'll make it, just keep going. And so even though, as he's walking across, there are these flames and water rushing and crashing and pulling him in either direction, if he just stays on this white path, then he's able to cross over. And once he steps onto the path, surprisingly, quickly and easily able to cross over to the other path. So this is, of course, a metaphor. a very powerful and meaningful metaphor. And each of these things represents something, of course, in our lives. So this side, this eastern side, we could say, the eastern side is this world of delusion. Says that this world is like a burning house. That's the way the Buddha often describes it. But that this world we live in, this world of egocentric, self-centered thinking, is like this very dangerous and difficult place. And we have all of these negative things, these brigands and wild beasts. They're described as the six senses. So the things that you see, you hear, you taste, you touch, you smell, and the things that you remember seeing, hearing, tasting, thinking about, all of these are pulling you into this idea of attaching and grasping. Remember, again, the Buddha's, the second noble truth is that we suffer, we have a hard time because we grasp onto those things that we want. And what do we want? We want to hear things. We want to hear people say, wow, I love your haircut. We want to hear people, we want to see people smile at us. We want to feel people give us a hug, right? We want to taste that delicious ice cream. Right? We want to feel that comfortable, cool air inside with the air conditioning up on a hot day, right? We want to remember and think back to those fun times and those good things we had. And all of these pleasures are not bad in and of themselves. It's that attaching that it's got to be my way. It's got to be my way. I think about my dad sometimes. My dad comes out to visit quite a bit. And as a result of his coming to visit, he's had the opportunity to encounter many things in Japanese culture and Japanese American culture that he would not normally get to experience living in semi-rural Minnesota where I grew up. And one of the things he loves about our temples is the food. So all of us love the food, right? And there's always a really wonderful spread of desserts at any service. And so I remember one day he saw someone had gone to the dessert table and had this round white, some sort of a dessert, because it was from the dessert table. And they took a bite, and it was sort of this brownish color inside. And he said, wow, I want to go get one of those chocolate muffins. Chocolate muffins, right? And so he went and he got one and he bit into it, and it wasn't chocolate. Can you guess what it was? Uncle, right? It was a red bean paste, which is good, but it's not chocolate, right? So, and there are two ways in which you can react to that. And I give my father credit, because one reaction would be, ugh, what is this? You have that expectation. Chocolate has a certain flavor and texture. And Anko is something, it's sweet, they're both sweet, but otherwise very different. But he said, like, oh, that's good too. And he enjoyed eating it, right? But that's our experience in life. We see things, things are constantly not going the way we expect. And it's that attachment. So this world is that world of frustration and anger when things don't go our way, when things don't go my way. It's that feeling of anger and frustration that we physically have these feelings of tension, or something in our stomach, or our legs, or our arms, or our neck, or our face, or clenching our teeth, or whatever we do. That physical experience and that mental reaction, and all of that is very unpleasant here in this world of delusion. And there's a teacher who came into this world to help us to break out of that. And that teacher is Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha was the historical Buddha who lived in India about 2,500 years ago. He was a person like you and me, physical, human being. He lived in our world, and he experienced all of the things that we experience: pleasure, pain, happiness, suffering, sadness, parting from loved ones, all of that. He went through it, and he realized a way out of this world. And so he is here with us on this shore. He came into this world. He gave us these teachings. He's here with us on this shore saying, this is the way forward. This is the direction. I'm here with you in this world of experience, and I can show you the way out. Step forth onto this white path. And then this side is the realm of peace and bliss. We also call this the Pure Land. And this is where we realize nirvana. This is the realization of nirvana. That blowing out, that end of suffering and difficulty. So when we talk about the Pure Land and Pure Land Buddhism, we're talking about how are you liberated from suffering? How do you break out of this suffering and difficulty? How do you cross over this river of difficulty to realize birth over here, over here? This blue side, this water, is greed. You fall in and you can just sink deeper and deeper, right? You get something that you want, and you just want more, right? You can just go further and further down, sinking into it. You can get carried away in a current of greed. You go in to buy a new car. You go in to buy a new car, and you walk in and you think, okay, I got this much money, I'll get a Sentra, and then you walk in and you say, I want to get a Sentra, and they say, oh yeah, but that's a nice car. Have a look at the Ultima, look at these features. You're like, ooh, I could use that. It's like, how about we take a look at the Maxima? And oh, look at that, it's got these features, you have little windows so you can see when you're backing up, oh, I need one of those, right? And so you can just get swept up further and further, carried away, and ooh, and that's good, ooh, and that would be even better, and that's nice, and carried away and carried away. So many aspects of our life. You get something that you really, really wanted. You want chocolate cake. You get a chocolate cake, and as you're eating, what would go great with this? Some ice cream, right? It's that you got that. There's that one more thing that would make it a little bit better. This red is fire, anger. You see red, the burning, that feeling. That it physically feels hot, right? If you get really mad, you get flushed. Maybe you start to sweat a little bit. The physical feeling of heat that comes from anger, right? And so there's this path. There's this just dangers that we live in the sense of falling into these kinds of suffering. And on this side of the shore, in this realm of peace and bliss, this is Amida Buddha. The awakened one of immeasurable wisdom and compassion. So that Namu Amida Butsu, that's me here. Oh my gosh, look at this mess that I'm in over here. I need to take refuge over here. So this is the Nembutsu. This thing that connects us, this white path, is entrusting. Sometimes we use the word Shinjin, that's kind of a technical term. But to me what this means is you hear the teachings of the Buddha and you say, that's about me. That's about me. Sometimes you'll hear a Dharma talk, and then the minister will be saying something, they'll be describing someone, it's like, yeah, that's right. They're talking about somebody's foolishness or their greed, and you're like, yeah, that's right. That's right. My wife needs to hear this Dharma talk, right? She needs to hear this message. So many times you hear people say that. I wish my husband was here. I wish my wife was here. My son needs to hear that Dharma talk. Looking, somebody else, they need to hear this message. I see their problems. I see what's wrong with them. This would straighten them out. But this is entrusting it's about me. To be able to say, have that self-awareness, that mindfulness, to say, oh yeah, that's actually describing me. And so that's where that sincere appreciation comes. It's not like, oh, that would be nice for them, but when it's for you, when that lifeguard is jumping in to pull you out of the water, then you feel, thank you for me. This is saving me. And that's what the teachings of the Buddha are for us. This teaching, it's pulling us out. It's helping us along to help us to cross this path. So for me, this is what mindfulness in the Jodo Shinshu tradition is about. And it resonates deeply for me with this teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha and with the perspective of other Buddhist traditions to recognize and look within, to cultivate some self-awareness, but then also to turn our minds to the guidance of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, to see that there's this other way of looking at our lives in this world, this other way that can provide us with freedom, liberation from suffering, and to live on this path. And the beautiful thing about the Jodo Shinshu tradition is that our lives in this lifetime, it's about living in this path, which is to say that living in the midst of greed and anger, that it's there all around us, it's there within us, that I'm not going to become totally calm and peaceful. I know I'm not. You might, but I'm not going to. I just don't see that happening. But there is this path, this direction where although the anger comes up, the greed comes up, I don't need to be carried away by it. It can come up, I can recognize it. Hello, anger. Hello, greed. But then to be rooted and have this clear perspective of where I'm going. And when you live in that way, then it doesn't need to cause so much trouble. And you come to live very much more harmoniously with the other people around you. Because you don't think of yourself as just me on my own, in my own path, but rather we're all mutually beneficiaries of this Buddha's teaching, this Buddha's wish for all of us to live compassionately. So rather than me and you, it's all of us facing in this same direction. And so there's, it's much more difficult to have a confrontation with somebody when you're facing in the same direction. If you're facing each other, then it's like you're trying to go in opposite directions, whereas we face together this realm of the Buddha's immeasurable peace and bliss. So we're about at our time here. I think I'll just conclude here, and then I'll be around for the rest of the day. I'll be kind of, hovering around, lurking in the corners, trying not to be too creepy. But feel free if you have some questions or reflections on anything that I've shared. I welcome that and look forward to our conversation and to spending this time together here today. So please join me in Gassho. Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu. Namu Amida Butsu. Namandab, 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 namandab. Okay, thank you.